as fast as possible. And I want to thank David for finding the little boy and girl to represent that kind of pace. I also want to thank David Dillon for finally getting some, if we go to the next slide here, finally getting some more clothes on these poor kids, especially this week. It's a little frigid out there. But what we want to do is let Jack and Jill here, or whoever they are, express a form of this question about the pace of grace. How do we do Christmas? And how do we do Christmas? And here's the way we're putting it in the key of Jesus. In other words, how do we honor this one who deserves the biggest blow-up party you can imagine? How do we honor him and celebrate Jesus Christ without the celebrations themselves overshadowing him? And in such a way that our celebrating is more draining than it is feeding of our faith, hope, and love. And to give some direction on that, I want to take you into part of the Christmas story in the Gospel of Luke. So if you find that, page 933 of the Church Bible. And this is part of the Christmas story that we're a little less familiar with, because obviously you have Jesus, you've got Mary and Joseph, you've got the then supporting cast of the shepherds and the wise men, and you have the sheep and the other various barn animals. But there are a few other people that never get into the children's pageant, and yet they have a significant role to play in these events that begin to change the whole world. And I'm talking about, first of all, the second or third cousin of Jesus named John, who's born about 6 months prior, and his parents, elderly parents, Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. And the reason I want to talk about them is that Zechariah and Elizabeth experienced two big celebrations, and I think we get a few clues as to how we can celebrate Christmas, but also the other ways that we just take in the goodness of life. And two breakthroughs that led to celebrations for them. One related to Zechariah's job, the other related to this elderly couple who had no children, finally having a little baby boy. Now, take a look at the Gospel of Luke, and there you can see part of Zechariah's story. He's one of the thousands of priests surrounding Jerusalem, and part of the need and the custom was that day by day in the sacred temple, one of these thousands of priests would be chosen by lot to go into the central part of the temple and continue to light the incense that represented the prayers of the people who would be waiting outside. Now, it's a rare opportunity because there were so many priests that you were really lucky if you got chosen by lot. It was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of deal, and it's like Zechariah wins the lotto. He gets this high privilege, and there must have been great joy that he actually gets to do this, to step into the center of the sacred temple and represent the people in this way. And so he's gone into the temple, and now look at Luke 1, and let me start reading from verse 11. He's in the temple, and then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. Many of the people of Israel will he bring back to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." And of course, you know, this John the Baptizer, who shows up in the wilderness to announce the coming of the Messiah. When I look at verse 18, Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man and my wife is well along in years." That's a kind way of saying she's an old lady. Verse 19, the angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not be able to speak until the day this happens, because you didn't believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Well, Elizabeth doesn't even get pregnant, despite being way up in years. And then 6 months later, see this in verse 26, the same angel shows up with a young relative of Elizabeth named Mary. And he says, you too are going to have a baby boy, and this little child will be nothing less than the very Son of God, who will step into the kingdom of David, and his kingdom will never, ever end. Well, then she visits Elizabeth, and back to that a little bit. And let's go back to Elizabeth and Zechariah's story down in verse 57. When it was time for Elizabeth to have her baby, she gave birth to a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown her great mercy, and they shared her joy. On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to name him after his father Zechariah. But his mother spoke up and said, no, he is to be called John. They said to her, there's no one among your relatives who has that. When they made signs to his father to find out what he would like to name the child, he asked for a writing tablet, and to everyone's astonishment, he wrote, his name is John. Immediately, his mouth was opened and his tongue was loosed, and he began to speak, praising God. Now you see what's going on here. You've got two celebrations. You've got this great honor of doing something big for God. And then you've got the birth of this baby boy, a complete surprise, especially to an elderly couple. And what happens is that the big job for God gets disrupted by God. It was a big enough thing that Zechariah was getting to do this, but now God manifests his word, his promise through this angel Gabriel, and it says, against all expectations, you're going to have a baby boy, and this baby boy is going to prepare the way for God himself showing up, the Lord himself showing up, the anointed one, the Messiah. And then the baby's born, and everybody's celebrating, but it's time to name the child. And here's the key thing. Here's the main thing that where I think we can make some connections to our own celebrations. The child gets named not according to traditions, where in that context, you have Zechariah Jr. or some other family name. But the baby's not named according to family tradition, but according to that promise that God gave to Zechariah. Now, what does that have to do with the way we celebrate Christmas? Well, let me give you something to think about, a possible intersection here. In our various celebrations of all the good things in life, and we have all kinds, birthdays, anniversaries, we have graduations, we have retirement parties, Broncos win, we celebrate, as we will later today, and then we have this really big one called Christmas. Here's the deal. We can do all that the way we've always done it, which is not necessarily bad at all, just the way we've always done it according to traditions, and even enjoy some of those really weird surprises that may come up, like some of the stories we heard. Most of them are pretty good. Or we can name, if you will, the celebration according to what God has given, what God is doing. It may look pretty much exactly the same, but when we name something, we are making a connection with the giver of all gifts and the best gift of all. And that's what Zechariah was doing when he says, this great gift of the Son will be named according to God's promise, and make the connection with the greater thing that God was doing in his family for Israel and even for the world. A way of putting this is that whatever you do, and just insert in there, in your doing of Christmas, in whatever you do, whether word or deed, do it all. Do it all, including your various celebrations, birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, etc. Do it all in the name. Name it according to Jesus, who is Lord over all things, and who becomes God with us in all things, with us in everything. Name it according to his name, in the reality of his presence, giving thanks to God the Father through him. That's one of two real key scriptures here I'd like you to think about for everything in life, including how are you going to do Christmas. Now just as one example of what it means to do everything in the name of Jesus, think back the way we do Christmas. Here's a representative picture I'll put up if this thing will work. Needle Hall Thomas. Next slide. There it is. How do we do Christmas? Well, we shop. Not all bad, but would you agree that our typical Christmas seasons in America have grown way beyond a kind of holy day in the rhythm of the Christian kind of a celebration? I mean, here's the deal. Christmas in America is a massive industry. And apart from Christmas, our economy would be in terrible shape. And I think this is not all bad. I mean, I think capitalism is probably all in all the best kind of economic system for society to have. And our particular capitalist system, you know, some of you have your own businesses, if you're a merchant and so on. If you don't have a really good December, you're dead in the water. That's where most of the money comes in. And it's just a huge part of our economy, and it builds on a blend of all kinds of countless cultures and religious traditions. Like, for example, this one, the Black Friday Braveheart. Maybe you met this person at the mall if you were stupid enough, I mean, courageous enough to actually shop on Black Friday. But, you know, David, this wasn't, where's David? It wasn't that funny in this service either. I almost dropped it out. Oh well, we'll move on. How are we gonna do Christmas? How are we gonna do Christmas? There have been Christians in history, Christ followers in history, who pretty much say that Christmas, the way it's celebrated, is a pagan, blasphemous parody of actually honoring the Lord Jesus Christ. And so they don't just stop singing Christmas in the key of Jesus, they don't sing that at all. And there aren't too many people in Western civilization, Christians, who would look at it that way and throw it out, you know, altogether. But it's part of our heritage. A big part of American heritage is the Puritans, the English and American colonial Puritans, devout followers of Jesus. They pretty much said, this is blasphemous, this holiday called Christmas. And they avoided it. I mean, one thing they probably knew that Jesus was almost certainly born in the spring, like other people I know. Little side note. But they just felt it obscured the truth of the gospel, and so they threw it out altogether. Now, I don't think there are too many people around like that. I doubt that any of you would throw out Santa, throw out the Christmas tree, throw out the decorations, throw out the gift exchange, and we'll just have pure, direct worship. Here's what I think most Christ followers do. We have, and you know, I'm just going to need your help. This thing is not working. We need parallels. What we need, not what we need, but what we do is parallel celebrations. We have the sort of sacred Christmas here, and we have the so-called secular Christmas over here. And so we jump into the Santa visiting and the present buying, the tree decorating, the office partying, and then we jump back over into let's go to church and sing carols, and hear the Christmas concert, see the children's play, and have a candlelighting service and so on. We just sort of kind of go back and forth, sometimes sort of blending them, but we go back and forth until we finally finish off the eggnog, pack up the stuff, and move on to New Year's. And it's not all bad. I mean, it's not all bad to celebrate various cultural traditions that aren't distinctly Christian. It's just like many Christians will celebrate a Bronco win pretty much the same way a non-Christian would. I mean, my wife will do her usual, painting her face orange and blue. and then if they win, she'll go out the front lawn and just scream her little lungs out. That's my advice. That's right. That's it. Yeah, my wife actually likes the Broncos, but she's very certain that if she's actually in front of the TV watching, they will lose. And that's very true. True. But anyway, I think there's nothing wrong with this. You're going to celebrate that way. But let me suggest an alternative to parallel, side-by-side celebrations. And that's to, try this one more time. Okay, we'll get to that. guess. Is to let God with us, name and so dwell all that we do, including our celebrations of Christmas. Now that's just slightly different from the parallel celebrations, and yet it's significantly different. Because instead of having this celebration here, the so-called sacred, and this one here, the so-called secular, all things are sacred under the Lordship of Christ, and so you put all that you do, it's not explicitly Christian, under the Lordship of Jesus, who is Emmanuel in all things. You do it, everything, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, let me just give you one example of that. One possible application of that. What are we going to do with this guy? I mean, the one on the left, the one on the right. Get the poor kid out of there, you know? But what do we do with Mr. Claus? What do we do with Santa? Especially as followers of Christ. You may know a little bit about this guy and how the form of Santa we have in our culture goes back to the mid-1860s when Thomas Nast drew this drawing, and ever since, that's kind of what Santa Claus has looked like in various versions. If you trace back the fairly complicated history, it's going to include the Dutch Sinterklaas. I suppose the malls go a lot with him, right? And then if you trace it back even further to pre-Christian Europe, you're going to find that the Germanic god Odin has contributed to our understandings, or our pictures, if you will, of Christmas. This looks more like Gandalf, the wizard. But the Germanic god Odin, also he was popular in the Scandinavian countries, would show up in the winter season. It was called Yule. It had nothing to do with the birth of Jesus. And would engage in what they call the wild hunt. I can't remember what they hunted, but he kind of morphed into a version of Sinterklaas and eventually Santa Claus. So all this complicated history plays into our version of Santa Claus. But do you know, I think you do, that if you trace back the history of these kinds of Christian celebrations that include something like Santa Claus, that you can trace it back to a real man. But you know what his name is? Nicholas, right? And it goes back to about 300, that's exactly what it looked like. That was in photography, digital photography. And about 380, who knows what it looked like. But about 300 years after Jesus or so, this man was born in what we now call Turkey. And his parents were very wealthy. He was an only child, but they died when he was quite little. And when it came time for him to receive the rather huge inheritance that his parents had, you know, he did as a devout believer. His parents were believers, and then he was as well. He proceeded to give it all away. He took seriously what Jesus told the rich young ruler, give away all your possessions to the poor and follow me. And that's exactly what he did over a short period of time. Because of this clear devotion to Jesus Christ, he became a leader within the church there in Turkey. He was named as a bishop, which back then wasn't so much a big office, but a recognition that here's a person that has the wisdom to oversee the various churches in that town and region. That's where the word bishop comes from, overseer, overseeing with wisdom and compassion, the clusters of churches and other pastors. And as we trace back to the facts behind the legends, and there are many legends, here's what comes out regarding Nicholas. He was a man of extraordinary generosity, especially for the poor, because of his deep faithfulness to Jesus as Lord. He had extraordinary generosity, especially for the poor, coming out of his deep, passionate faithfulness to Jesus. Now let me just give you a couple stories that almost certainly are true, though we can't prove it. Nicholas was one of many who attended the famous Council of Nicaea in the early 300s. What was that? Well, Emperor Constantine gathered Christian leaders from all over the world because there was a lot of division over who is Jesus really. Is he, as most were saying, 100% God and 100% human? Our brains can't comprehend that. But that's the mystery of what Christmas is all about, God becoming a human being. So is he 100% both or something different? And there were some who were saying, well, that's impossible. That doesn't make any sense. He must be eternally God, but he just was disguised as a human being when he was born and lived and went to the cross and so on. And most believers were saying, no, that doesn't fit the Bible at all. And what was actually more prominent right then in the early 300s, mainly because the voice for this was very eloquent and popular, a guy named Arius. He was saying just the opposite. Well, we can't look at this, obviously. He's a man, this Jesus. He's a human being. And he's the begotten Son of God, so he's the creature of God. He's just a really great man. He's a perfect man. And he should be respected, and through his teaching and so on, then we can know the one God that we call the Father. And this was venturing outside what the church was coming to understand in the biblical picture of Jesus. Well, Nicholas was very true to the full picture, the mystery of God being of Jesus being fully God and fully human being. And supposedly at the Council of Nicaea, he walked up to Arius and punched him in the face. Now I wouldn't say that's doing things to King Jesus, but what was behind that anger, which I bet he repented for that. But what was behind that anger in Nicholas wasn't the key of Jesus. It was a deep devotion and worship of this man Jesus as nothing less than the eternal Son of God, who has dwelt with the Father infinitely and eternally. And the thing is about that deep devotion and faithfulness to Jesus as Lord, it didn't manifest itself, except for maybe that one occasion, as a kind of self-righteous anger at the people who don't have their theology right. Here's the main thing that happened to Nicholas. It's deep devotion to Jesus as Lord, born the fruit of extravagant, sacrificial generosity, especially for the poor. Here's another story about that, there are many. But the most famous story is where in his hometown there was a family that lost what wealth they had. They were desperately poor. And the man had 3 daughters. And as the custom would be in really many cultures, including that one, if you had 3 daughters and you didn't want to have to feed them the rest of their lives and you wanted them to get married, you have to pay a dowry to the prospective husband. Well, this guy had no money whatsoever to do that. And not because he wanted to get rid of his daughters, but just to keep them all alive. He was about to sell them all into slavery. That's not what he wanted, but at least they'd stay alive as slaves. Well, as the story goes, 3 different late nights, huge bags of gold were found inside the house. And supposedly even dropped down the equivalent of a chimney. That's some of our traditions there. Well, it was Nicholas doing it anonymously, secretly, doing it sacrificially, because it's not like he had a lot of money. And many stories of this kind of extravagant generosity that he then tried to stir up in others. Now, what am I saying with all this? Well, basically, you don't have to kick Santa out of your celebrations of Jesus, but here's the deal, especially, and this is especially for those of you that hang out with little children, parents, grandparents, big brothers, sisters, whatever. As you include Santa Claus in the celebrations, well, just tell the whole story. And trace it back to the real man, called Nicholas. And as you do that, make sure he's positioned correctly. It's not that Jesus is here, it's Santa is here. And we'll talk about Jesus now and then, we'll talk about Santa now and then. Just especially looking at Nicholas himself. move them in such a way that Santa Claus and Nicholas, with you, and like the real Nicholas, is bowing to the Lordship of Jesus. Maybe you've seen pictures like this. Now, I bet most of you have nativity sets, right? Yeah, my wife has hundreds. And she does. Jesus, Mary, Joseph, shepherds, wise men, sheep. It's really cool. Well, look, maybe some of you have a little Santa that's also kneeling there. Then you might say, oh, for goodness sake, Santa wasn't in Bethlehem, the manger. And, well, here's the deal, wise men weren't there either. It's about a year later they show up. There's a lot of demythologizing that you have to do. Eventually, just if you really want to have some truth historically as well as the truth of Jesus is, okay? I mean, for example, we're going to sing probably many times Away in a Manger. Do you really believe no crying did he make? I mean, that's that heresy that says, well, he was just disguised as a human. He was actually this divine being. No, he was human. He cried. He pooped in his diapers, okay? All right, so we have to get the truth. And yes, Santa Claus was not at the birth of Jesus, all right? But I'll tell you something that's the truth of all truths. Ultimately, every knee shall bow, and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord over all things, to the praise and the glory of God. And I say, why not, as much as possible, bring everything in our lives and let it bow to Jesus, including Santa Claus and all our celebrations. And here's the test. If you can't in your heart do that, if it just doesn't seem at all appropriate to have Santa bowing to Jesus, then maybe for at least you should get rid of Santa. And not let that confuse your kids, not let that distort the true picture. Maybe that's what you need to do. But every knee shall bow, and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord. Bowing even as the real Nicholas did. And in such naming of the real Santa, as above all faithful to Jesus, Lord of all things, it gives you the opportunity to make some connections to things like, say, gift giving, which all of us are going to be doing. Make a connection, do some naming there, where your gift giving, your present exchanges are connected to the ultimate giver and the ultimate gift. Because here's what it's finally about in the heart of God. He wants us to be generous with each other, but not for the sake of accumulating stuff, but to build bonds of love. That's what this stuff is about. And too often, that's all it is. Well, I need a new sweater. Okay, I'll get you a sweater for Christmas. Well, that's okay. But what if in our gift giving, for example, we didn't just give that thing that the person needs, but with that thing, as good as it is, we also just try to see if there's a significance for that relationship. And now some of you are really creative. You've got a gift that really kind of expresses the relationship. A lot of us aren't that creative, but don't you at least do? On that little card, instead of just saying, like in my case, to Darlene, love Steve. It's okay. At least somebody else doesn't open it. But you can take 15 seconds, at least, and just spread a little love. I want this to represent just one way I'm grateful for you. And let me also say, here's one way I'm praying for you in the next year. Just a sentence or two. But just, you see how that's naming this as part of something bigger that God is doing than just giving us more stuff, but building the bonds of love. And then, can we let that, like Nicholas, move outside our immediate bonds? I mean, what if, many of you do this, but what if for every dollar you spend on the in-house gifts, you spend $1 on some way, together, consciously, intentionally as a family, you're reaching out to those who, in a very broken world, have felt the brunt of that more than you have. And we're doing this with Angel Tree and Christmas Store and Love Inc. and the YFC Project with these foster children that have no place to go as teens and so on, countless other ways. And so many of you are doing this year-round, but can we keep growing that direction? What especially, it's not just a token thing, we should give something for this year, but draw the family into it. Have the kids be blessed by knowing they're blessed to be a blessing. And I know some families where for every new toy they get, they're asked to pick a toy and give that away to someone else, one that actually works. It's not just broken. I mean, these are just some of the ways where we can name it according to Jesus and place it under Jesus as Lord, and not just off to the side as a parallel or even a more dominating form of expression. You see what I'm saying? Now, let's look at a few other examples from some of you.
Well, one of the ways that Jesus shows up at Christmas time for us is through a tradition at the Lounsbury home where each of us give a special gift to one of the other family members. And as part of that gift, we all write a poem about that person. And those heartfelt Christmas thoughts really are just very important during the season. It's a way that Jesus shows up during Christmas.
In Thailand, I found that more people come to Christ during Christmas than any other season of the year. And the reason is that the concept of giving gifts is very strange to them. And they get so impressed by Christians doing that. And at the school where I taught, we had a big Christmas event. And many people from the community would come and many would accept Christ. And that was very exciting.
And one of my favorite Christmas memories has not happened yet. We're waiting to spend our first Christmas with our new daughter, Bridget. And I can't wait for that picture of her under the tree, grabbing ornaments and coming to church and just experiencing the Christmas season with a new baby. I don't think it gets any better, and her Christmas dress is so cute.
That's the way I see Jesus is when the kids come into work and they see my beard and they say, hey, it's Santa and all that. Just the joy that Christmas can bring to children. And as an adult, we lose some of that mystery, but for the kids, it is a magical and mystical time of year.
So one of my favorite things at Christmas is driving around in the snow at night and seeing all the Christmas lights. There's something about the atmosphere that's created by those lights that just gives me this sense of connection that we've been celebrating the same thing that Christians have been celebrating for 2,000 years. And
I took my family to Alaska and we were ministering to airmen. We were shocked that that Christmas was so important to these guys and ladies that would have just been waking up in their dorm by themselves. We said, hey, if any of you want to sleep over at our house, and they all wanted to wake up in a family home at Christmas time. We had 20-some airmen wake up and share Christmas with my family. So that was of Jesus.
And so in less than 48 hours, I directed a choir program, I buried my aunt, and I drove 1,200 miles. And it all started to feel very surreal. Like, did this really happen? And then it struck me that really kind of all of that is what Christmas is about. You know, it's got the joys, and it's big enough to include the sorrows, because the sorrows are not the last word.
But really what is most important to me about that day is that I got to spend it with my father. And I have had many great Christmases, but not too many memories of the Christmases I spent with my father. And now that he's in heaven, Christmases can be very difficult, but I know that he is with Christ, and there is no greater place to celebrate Christmas than with Christ.
When I was 11 years old, our house was bombed out in Germany, and the townhouse for my grandfather was bombed out. So all four of us, my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother and I, we were living in a one-room garden house outside of Hamburg in Germany. And it was snowing. So Christmas Eve, he took me on the snow sled, and the four of us, we walked to church. And it was beautiful because the music in the church, I wasn't regularly going to church because of the constant air raids. But I heard again and again that I had a Heavenly Father. And that was giving me such a peace that I actually had a Heavenly Father, because my father was missing in action since 1941.
Okay, so for the Christmas here, in Western countries, maybe it's a holiday or family gathering, but you know, in China, this is a really good day for people to know Jesus Christ, because we have a very good excuse to reason to invite people to the church, and usually on Christmas Eve that day, every church in China is packed, and people will line up in this way, and this way, and people will go to the church, and we will grab this opportunity to spread the gospel, and there will be a lot of people receive Christ on that particular day.
And the other thing I can think of is really what I really like about Christmas, the most of all, is the fact that the term Emmanuel means that Jesus comes to dwell within us and live within our hearts. And I know that's kind of an abstract thing, but really that Christmas brings that to home, that Jesus is alive with me and with me every second of my life.
I mentioned the celebrations of Zechariah and Elizabeth. When Zechariah is celebrating that baby boy named according to God's word, here's part of what he says. Thomas, please go ahead. Would you read this with me? The rising sun will come to us from heaven to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the path of peace. My prayer is that see some fulfillment for you and for the people around you as you name this season as the coming of this light and this peace into this dark, conflicted world and even the darkness and conflict of our own lives. Let me tell you about one other celebration in that sub-story of Zechariah and Elizabeth. It's when Mary goes to see Elizabeth after the great news that she's going to have this amazing baby boy. And Elizabeth is already 6 months pregnant. And here's what happens when she arrives. Here's what Elizabeth says. As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever leaped for joy thinking about Jesus. I want to tell you that you will. I really believe you will when you see him face to face. When you see him and all the dazzling glory of who he is as the eternal Son of God, and see the remaining wounds of the scars in his hands and his feet from the cross that he went to for you and for me and for the whole world. I believe that on the one hand, you'll be kneeling, but also I believe that somehow you'll be leaping for joy. And this same Jesus, he's here. We don't see it with our eyes, but the same dazzling glory. The same awful scars. The one reminder there will be a new creation of the cost of our salvation. This Jesus is with us. And he's not just the reason for the season. He is life itself. The way to the truth. Worth giving all that we are. So we're going to take the bread and the cup now as we conclude our time together.